All right, there we go. So yeah, I will be talking about how because we were trying to figure out what should I be doing, like what should I be doing for this, and I had zero time to do this. So I just went into what I know and what I've been experimenting with lately. So which is to use Usable as a game development tool, and I'll lean more into generally how to use Usable in this context and not like how to program something in a game. So the first challenge was to move from programming to using an agent to program everything for you. Having multiple years of game development, it can be a bit hard to just like give up that thing that you have done for years and just hand it over to an agent, and then you just sit there and review everything he does and tell him if he's doing it wrong or not. But once you get past that point, which I think everyone basically needs to do at some point, you just start to realize how much faster you're actually working. So the first attempt, so I'll go through some scenarios that I've been experimenting with. So the first attempt was at the global GameJam last year, where Hannah and I, who was sitting back there, decided to see if we could build a game using Claude Code and Usable, and that was it. And we built a game called Infinite Memory, and yes, that is the name, not like actually solving infinite memory problems. And what this game was an IO mobile game. So it's a game where hundreds of people can play at the same time, live. And the game was that you're playing memory, the classic game where you have to flip cards. So you can see what other people are flipping and trying to steal from them and stuff like that. And if you guys want to try it, there's a QR code. It's live at the moment. It's been running for, I don't know, since January. And to start out with, the reason we picked this project specifically was because we just leaned into what we already have in Usable, which is all the knowledge we accumulated since we started using Usable, like how we develop back then, Flowcore. But yeah, so we used Next.js, the general tech stack that we had learned to use and like built a very strong foundation for how to build good Next.js applications. But the real magic comes from using Claude Code and Usable. And what I mean by that is that this is the general flow that you go through, which is that's me, implement the task. Claude Code checks the knowledge, like where he needs to go ask Usable and how to like communicate with Usable. And then he asks Usable, how do I do this specific task? Where he learns all the standards, security standards, and coding structure, basically everything you have to do in order to make a solid product. But the more important part, the more interesting part is that while he was developing a task, so I told him to just find this task in Usable and then implement it. While I did that, I in parallel started just communicating with him on how do we solve specific issues in this game. So for example, one of them was infinite scrolling, which is that in the game you can just keep scrolling and it will loop back around to give the sense that it's massive. As well as flipping of cards, which is, if anyone knows HTML, there's a difference. There's a canvas and a CSS. And one's really good for one thing and the other is really good for something else. And I needed both. And they do not play together. So I have to figure out how the heck do I do this, where I take the card, you press it, it goes up, flips around, and gets placed nicely back down. And the way we did this is that I do not use Usable chat as a one prompt. I just fire it off and then he figures everything out and then I just close my eyes and hope that it's okay. Instead, what we do is that we have a dialogue with the chat. So as you can see, we would go back and forth. He would mention some solution that we could try and use, and I would push back that I didn't like that idea, and then he might suggest something that's even better than what I could think of. And then we would just pop back and forth for like 20 to 30 minutes, depending on how complex this issue was. And once I was satisfied, I told him, can you now document this? Which was then stored in Usable. And once we got to that task, which was like ahead of time, I could just tell him, all right, continue on to the next task. You have all the information that we've been discussing beforehand. And that's in Claude, not in Usable Chat. The Usable Chat was just to figure out how the heck we solve this problem. And Claude Code was specific to just implement the thing. So that was just building a web app. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to say, sure, we have this amazing flow core workspace where we have all the knowledge we accumulated, but what if I start from scratch? What if I don't have all this knowledge just in Usable? So what I wanted to do was that I set up a game dev workspace where I defined how you are a good games programmer, what you have to consider when you make games, from how to design a game, what feels good in a game, the concept of game loops, like can you start and end the game, how do you end it, and stuff like that. Which ended up with me having something called a game concept, which is often used for, you guys might know something called a napkin idea. It's when you're at a restaurant, you get a really brilliant idea, and then you just write it on a napkin, and you bring the napkin home, or like a coffee filter or something, right? So it's like a throwaway idea that pops into your head, and you just, I want to document this. So one example here is that Hannah had an idea for a game, which we haven't implemented, but she just jotted down, you talk to Usable Chat saying, I have this game idea, I don't really have it fleshed out, I just want to make this, and you win the game like this, and you can be X amount of players, and I don't really care about the technical part, I just want to document it. What I did then is that we have a skill in this workspace where I basically tell them convert it to what you call a GDD, which is a game design document, which has everything from what the characters look like, the motivation of the characters, what the world looks like, what mechanics are in the game. Can you walk? Can you jump? Can you lose health or take damage or whatever, right? And what he does when you communicate with him about this is that he generates a million questions. He keeps asking you just constantly. For example, all right, what happens when the enemy touches you? I was like, well, I guess I didn't think of that. Well, I guess I take damage when he hits me. And then he goes, all right, you take damage. What does the health look like? Do you want it at the top? Do you want it at the bottom? Is it a percentage? Like, he basically just annoys you relentlessly until you've given him enough information to go, all right, this is actually a game that we can build now.
So this skill is in Claude, or this skill is still in Claude?
This skill has been developed specifically in Usable, and I can pull it into Claude.
Right.
So Claude can like pull on it, but this is specifically only Usable Chat. I haven't even touched Claude in this case.
Yeah.
And again, you could do this in Claude as well, and then just push it up to Usable.
No, so it's in Usable.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you could use Codex or whatever.
The most important part here is that he connects back to Usable so that he can start storing all these information, like all these documents. And what he ended up doing is he creates a design document, a bunch of features, and a crap ton of tasks based on all this information. And then the question became, all right, sure, now you have a task list, but how can you make sure that this actually lasts? Because the issue in general with AI is that if you just tell him to build something, he'll build it, and it looks fine, it works fine, but the second you actually want to expand on it, it just collapses within a few seconds because the code has been written terribly and it hasn't been designed to scale. So this is where more or less I came in, as well as other people that inspired me, which is that I've just filled this workspace with knowledge on what standards to use, how do you program, and what's general concepts in programming you need to consider when you develop things, how to use this specific language, how do you interact, or how do you write this specific programming language, and then moving further and further down into the specific development tool that you're using. For this case, it's Unity. And from all this, when he starts to write code, he always checks the standards first, making sure that he's not breaking any of them. So that I know for a fact that the code that he writes is strong, reliable, and expandable. And the fun part is, so I've kind of been talking about this entire time, is that as you develop things, as you can see, I have something called recipes and solutions. So recipes is just, how do I build a camera controller so I can move the camera around in the scene? Or how do I build like an enemy spawner or whatever it is, right? As well as the solutions is, I ran into this issue, we got it fixed, can you please document how you solved it? So that when it happens again in a different game or during this development cycle, he'll remember it and be able to just tell you, oh, it's probably X, Y, Z, because you already told me beforehand. So by doing this, you create like a continuous flow that makes your software better like he gets better and better at making video games. So for example, someone I helped recently had to make a camera controller so you can move around the camera, move around the world, and move the character around. I developed that, and usually it would take 5 to maybe 8 hours to do, whereas now it took, I think, an hour and a half. And that was me going in and testing it as well, and making sure everything felt right, and like tweak the numbers and stuff. And next time I do it, it will take a second to get done, because he already has the knowledge on how to do it. So my workflow now becomes, I develop through Claude Code or Codex or whatever agent you want to use. He connects to the development tool, like the game engine, which is in this case Unity, using MCP. I go in and into, for example, Unity, and make the small, like, creative adjustments. Like, oh, I think the character moved too fast, because I'm actually play testing and making sure it feels right. Whereas he takes the heavy load of actually programming everything. And then we both use Usable. So Claude uses it to gather knowledge as well as create knowledge, and I go in to discuss with him, like in a clean environment where I can just talk about concepts on how do we solve this issue. And then I thought I had one more thing, because now it was so easy to build things that I wanted to see, could I take Usable and shove it into Unity, into an environment where it technically does not belong? Because these tools are generally not made for, you can access a web browser and you can like type a text into it and then it like feeds back into the game. And it's very hard to do because it's not built for it. So during the Tonik GameJam last week, we decided to build something called the Undelivered, which is just purely an experiment to see, could I take Usable and integrate it into Unity and not have to stick with like a usable chat view? Because, you know, when you're making a game, you want to capture the feeling of what the game is and not have it look really nice and then there's a usable chat window on the side which doesn't match the colors or the feel or anything, right? And that's actually what we managed to do, which was a lot of fun. So if I just turn this on, you can see that the chat itself, like the chat window, is in that box right there. The input field is at the bottom. Again, this does not look like usable chat whatsoever. But because of how extendable Usable is, I managed to just connect directly into Usable and then just start rendering things the way I wanted it to be rendered. And the most fun part is that Usable has something called, we didn't really touch on embeddable usable chat, but you can embed Usable into your software, which allows him to communicate with your software as well. So as you can see, the character changed his emotions as I was chatting with him, depending on what I said. And that is because usable chat is actually able to tell Unity, all right, he said this, evaluate what he said, and based on what he said, call this tool inside Unity to set the mood. So he has 16 moods, I believe, so you can make him vomit and stuff as well. And what this game was that you're basically an interrogator and you have to try to break him to confess to his crimes. And one participant managed to do it, and I haven't done it yet because he just starts shouting that he wants his lawyer and stuff. And again, because this is embeddable chat, we made a custom expert into this chat where it gives him the context of who is he, how should he act, and does he need to be really defensive, and what happens when he gets really defensive. And what we could do easily in the future is, if he says he wants to bring his lawyer in, you spawn a second chat, and the lawyer will intercept all your messages and be like, no, my client does not need to answer that question. Like, you can just keep building on top of these things. So this is the general flow of it, right? That you can trigger the mood through tools the usable chat can connect to. The message itself can be sent via the chat at the bottom by just sending the message to the embeddable usable chat, and then it can render a response. And we explicitly made it sure that you cannot see previous messages, because this is like a dialogue. If you want to remember what he said, you have to write it down on a piece of paper or something. You actually have to take notes. You can't just scroll up to the top and say, oh, that's what you said, because that's not how an actual interrogation works. So it's just to demonstrate that you can even just cut off, like, I don't want to see the entire chat. I want to just see the one part that's important for making this game feel like we wanted it to feel. So my conclusion was that it is very viable to use Usable to make games. And if you use Unity, that's one option. There's Unreal Engine, there's Godot, there's lots of engines you can use. And generally, the reason people want to use game engines is because you have more like creative control rather than having to sit there and like, look at the code. You can actually move things around and evaluate and animate and make it feel good. And then, yeah, apparently it also works to integrate usable chat directly into a game. And now I'm worried what we'll think of next, because now we can kind of just do whatever we want. And that was my presentation, if anyone has any questions.
So, but you're talking about two different things. So using usable embeddable chat in a game.
Yeah.
But you jumped over the using usable embeddable chat as a tool to, or as a way of controlling Unity as well.
Yeah.
So, but you did that as well.
Yeah. So with usable embeddable chat, you have ways of like registering whoever wants to connect the tool into your chat. So you can use a usable embeddable chat in it's a very fun sentence to say, but you can use it in a website where you can say, for example, Luttaka uses it, the app that we're using at Tonik, which is, I got a list from Greg that said, can you add these 20 people to the system? And I was like, I cannot be asked to sit there and press new person, fill out information, save, new person. So instead, I just took the 20 people he sent me, pasted into usable chat, like the embeddable, like the one that was in Luttaka, and told him, can you just add these 20 people for me? And then in 5 seconds, he had added 20 people, as opposed to me having to sit there for 30 minutes just to get all these people in. And it's the same concept. Luttaka has tools that we built that allows usable chat to connect into the website and be like, create person, update person, delete person, or whatever it is, right? Same thing here, only in a completely different environment, because this is C# and not JavaScript. So just really.
But it still works. But there was a question earlier about could it work in Canva like that?
Yeah, definitely, because it's the same concept that you can just connect. If you take the chat, you can connect into other tools, and then you just present those tools so the usable can see them. Someone will. Brian might be bored, so you can do it.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
So as you're developing, and you're using the chat, usable chat, and that's talking to Claude, and then it's rendering the fixes, like you say, oh, it's moving too fast, slow it down, and talks to Claude, fixes code, renders, and then you test the code. Like, how is it? Are you talking to your phone? Like, how are you working and testing?
Generally, what I do is that Claude is running on my computer in a terminal, and then I have just Unity open. And then I just sit there and press play, and I just adjust things, and then I just pop back in and say, this isn't good enough, and then pop back in. So I just alt-tab, basically, between the two.
How long does it take?
Well, the funny thing is that he's using a tool in Unity that I never really used, but I always wanted to use, but I never really got into it, which is that it optimizes how fast it compiles like the code so you can try and run it. And because he does all of this manual work for me, it usually takes from 10 seconds to compile to 2, maybe 1 second, because he's optimized it. Like I could do it myself, but it's just really tedious to do this, whereas he can just, churn through it really quickly. So yeah. Any other questions?
No, I also had a similar question to the workflow. I mean, how exactly is that interaction working? Because I think this is quite unique because obviously they don't do things because it's C# and things like that.
Mm.
But also I had another question because much more kind of basic is that when you start this kind of a workflow, you're starting with a chat in Usable, correct?
Mm.
Yes. And at what point do you define the skills? Or what do you know? How do you know that you might need some new skills? If you do.
Yeah. One example I can use is that the workspace itself I created the workspace, and then you have all these boxes like where I store all the information like GDD, Game Concept and stuff. I actually didn't create any of the containers either. I just sat in the usable chat and said, all right, I want to build this type of workspace. I want to get this out of it. And then we just sat back and forth and communicated until I was satisfied with, all right, we need these boxes to make this thing work. And then I probably sat for like 30 minutes just trying to like hone in what it is that I wanted with him. And then once that was done, he just generated the entire thing. And it's kind of the same thing that when I feel, well, sometimes he actually offered it himself, but when I feel that I could do this faster, I will tell him, can you create a skill for this specific problem that like I have to do over and over and over? For example, what should we say? Like regenerating the AI pathways in like a scene or like a level, right? Because you changed the level and now you want to regenerate where the AI can walk. Instead of me having to open Unity, find the object and configure everything and press bake, so he like bakes it into the scene, I just create a skill called regenerate pathways or something like that, right? And then the AI itself can just figure out, oh, I changed a bunch of things in the scene, I'll just call the skill, and then he gets all the knowledge on how to do that, and then he just dives in.
You do it on the fly.
Yeah.
You do it as you have.
I generally don't create skills from nothing, because the skills I have created from nothing I tend not to use necessarily that much. But when I create them as I'm thinking of them while I'm in the weeds of things, I feel like they generally work way better because they have really strong context as to why the skill matters. Because in general, I think with AI, it's that asking him something and getting an answer is not as good as asking him and then giving him a reason for why you asked. That is really powerful, as opposed to just, can you tell me this? I can say, can you tell me this because I'm struggling with X, Y, Z.
Will you define the skill library in advance?
In what, sorry?
Like a skill library in advance?
I have some skills that I've made in advance, but they're more for just admin things. But in general, I would have the skills get generated as I'm using them. And then for the next project, I already have these skills to use for like working even faster.
Okay, thanks.
But you're accumulating knowledge. That's the point.
Yeah, as well as learning what takes long and what doesn't take long and generate skills based on those requests. We only have one question.
Yeah, you're collecting all this knowledge and memory. Can I self-host it, or when is this all at your servers? And can I extract it
And use it yourself.
All the values actually this memory, right? The models are replaceable.
Yeah, and I've filled it with everything that I've myself burned from a lot making games, like, because games are very different from general software because it's just so generic in what it is that you're actually trying to do, whereas software kind of follows a very linear curve of this is what we need to get done for it to be good enough. So yeah, there's a lot of knowledge in there, and I have been thinking of taking a lot of the recipes and stuff and like moving them into a public one, so anyone can tap
Yeah,
them.
I think for my own safety that this to me becomes very valuable. But
Mm.
now, if you close my account because you don't like me anymore, have I lost all of this? Or can I extract it?
Yeah, and usable because it's you can like pull it down. You can take an AI and tell them to pull everything down if that's the case.
Into files.
Yeah, because they are just markdown files.
Everything is marked down, so you can at any point take everything down.
Yeah.
So that's
And one last question, very quick. Can you delete something when you fragment something wrong?
Yes,
You just-
I have
delete
experience.
it, or-
I have experienced where he made something that I didn't like, but he documented it. So I just told him, "Can you go and update it to this fix?" And then he went in and fixed it.
Thank you, Jóhann.
Thank you.